Okay. Complicated, tech-savvy, innovative influence, convincing, adaptive, humanity, inclusiveness, multicultural, transformational, forward-thinking, digital, charisma, motivating, technology-driven, all very positive, eh? Okay, very good, very good. Humanity, adaptable, destructive. Alright. Volatile, digital, inclusivity, okay, that's together. Remote. Alright. Okay. Anyone who would like to give some short explanation? What do you mean by? Oh, now we have 4 biggest ones suddenly. Engagement, agile, empowering, and dynamic. Wow, that's fast. That is change. Okay. So, who would like to have some sharing, or what's your point of view about these words, the biggest words or the key words that are coming out here? Anyone? You see, when Susie talks, she likes to walk. Yes. Who would like to share? Okay. Common faces. Would you like to share?
Well, I think...
Just introduce yourself.
Oh,
What
yes.
year? What year? So?
Oh, I think you put me in a spot already. My name is Ravi, and I have the privilege of having 2 graduations at Manchester Business School. One, my master's, and then later my PhD. But I won't mention it in years, okay? Well, anyway, coming back to this question, I think maybe the word exciting is not there, but we are certainly in exciting times with the way the external environment, business environment is moving. I think there's a lot of uncertainty and disruption along the way. So that will, I think, create a sort of maybe a bit difficult to define leadership in some definite terms. And therefore the key word should be also adaptable to the changes. And then if you're talking about technology driven, I think I see some words there. I think that also could be relevant. But I like the words up there, agile, empowering. Change, of course, it has always been change, but I think this is something that has got to be given more thought as we progress forward in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you. And thank you for always being very supportive of the alumni events. Alright. Who else would like to share? Just one more? Oh, okay. What's your name, please?
My name is Wan Ahmad. I graduated from UMAAM actually a very long time ago. I'm 60 years old now, but what I see here is that it's a very optimistic view of the future.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Okay, just out of curiosity, the younger ones lah, right? Okay lah, just now I said one more. Yes. All right, nice. Introduce yourself.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Alison. I've been in Malaysia for the last 4 years, and I graduated from the University of Manchester in 2009 in international management. But I'm actually French, and I work for a Bulgarian company. Yeah, it's indeed very positive. I use the word remote because I feel that today we do a lot of remote management. So basically, I have a team of 20 people across Asia Pacific, 4 different cultures, and I interact most of the time through Skype with my team members. So when we talk about leadership, I talk about remotely. And my 2 bosses, my CCO and COO, are on the other side of the world. So for me, leadership is really remote. But I also talked about multiculturality, and I think the last thing I would like to share on leadership is that I think in the recent years, it's probably the topic in which companies have spent most efforts, money, training. It's a huge topic that we study. And I studied international management at university as well, so a lot of theory. I did a lot of training when I was at Orange, my previous company. And I see a huge gap between the theory and the practice. And for me, that's what's most striking, and that's why I was really keen to actually exchange with people who practice leadership every day. Because there's a huge gap between the prescriptions and what we should do, and how people expect their leaders to behave, and how leaders actually behave, and how people perform. So I find this topic really interesting.
Thank you. Oh, well, okay, that's a very interesting opinion. And later on, please feel free to interact and engage further, yeah, with questions. Okay. Please, this is a very interesting tool that you can use at home even. Eh? What is one word to describe your allowance, for example? All right. Okay. So let's proceed to hear from our panelists. Yeah. Prof. Fiona. Right. So most people viewed the 21st century as a new world compared to the 20th century. A new world, a breath of new, fresh ideas. In the 20th century is all usually, as far as I'm aware, please correct me, is about the land, labor, and wealth. Yeah? And 21st century, what is it about? So what are the differences between 21st and 20th century, and what are the challenges that you foresee for us in 21st century leaders?
Thank you, and a great question to start the conversation. So thinking about the centuries, and as we move from one century to the next, of course, a historian would always say to you there are both continuities and change, and that these things coexist. In the newspapers, we tend to focus on the excitement of change and everything that comes with it. But just because we designate a certain time, a new century, it's not to say that things that have been happening in a previous century suddenly stop. And as just somebody said earlier about the University of Manchester, if you visit it, there will be things that you see that are very much the same, but then there are also parts of the institution that have changed considerably. And that's true of the world and the world order in which we live in the 21st century. But focusing, that said, on some of the changes, of course, what we are seeing in the world is a new world order in terms of countries and their levels of development and economic growth, seeing some major changes away from the world order which was perhaps established after the Second World War, seeing the huge economic growth and development of countries in, of course, Asia, including yourselves. I was amazed at the number of cranes and development that I have seen in Kuala Lumpur even over the last couple of days. So a huge change in the world order as different countries become more economically powerful and have greater influence on the world economy, and other countries also decline. Of course, already within this century, we have experienced a major economic event in terms of the global financial crisis that happened now over 10 years ago. And that has brought to an end an era and has brought us into a new one, a very challenging one as the economy recovers from the repercussions of that period of considerable shock to the economic system. There is both the economic and the social and the political repercussions of the global financial crisis, I think, are still being felt around the world. So major issues that have continued since then is returning to a period of economic growth, but one that involves increasingly inclusive growth, because we are aware that of the previous era, that there were some who have enjoyed the fruits of prosperity, and there are also people that have not enjoyed that prosperity. So I think if you read the Financial Times and look at what CEOs in America or China or many places are saying, are thinking about, as we go forward, what is the type of economic growth that we have, and how does it include everybody in that process of uplifting standards of living and economic and social and political well-being. We are, of course, seeing, in a way, the political fallout of the global financial crisis and all that came before, in that we are living in a quite tumultuous political climate. Of course, in the UK, we have our own little local issues called Brexit. I'll try not to mention it anymore, but it creates difficult circumstances of uncertainty, considerable period of change, and all some of the key words, we've lost them at the moment, but we saw earlier that we have to address how do we make decisions in times of uncertainty, how do we use information, particularly big data, in shaping our decisions, how do we make the right decisions, and what that requires of us as leaders during this time. So those are some of the things that we are confronting as in the opening decades of the 21st century, as we see the emergence of the new world economic order, and how we adapt to that both socially and culturally and politically over the next few decades.
Thank you, Prof. Fiona. If you like, we can show the result throughout. It's fine. Thank you. So you can still internalize the words. And thank you, Prof. Fiona, for such an insightful elaboration of the 20th and also the 21st century and all the challenges that we are having as part of, I'm assuming, the VUCA world, right? The vulnerability, the uncertainty, the complexity, right? And the ambiguity of what had happened so far in the 21st century. All right, so let's move on to Datuk Siti. Okay, so we have, as you can see, the panelists is coming from public sector, banking, and also engineering technologies industry. So in your point of view, Datuk, in regards to leadership in the 21st century, where are you looking to anticipate the change? And how do you lead through times of this uncertainty and the challenges that you need to face as a leader?
As everybody is aware, technology has brought in a lot of changes in how human beings communicate, how they engage. The good thing about technology is that we are able to engage a wider number of respondents, better feedback, and also to make a better judgment as to whether what the government is doing. I have to speak from the public sector perspective because this is how we've been operating all the while, and with the new changes that's happening over the years, then we realize that we cannot work as how it was in the past, despite the fact that we still have leaders saying that the boss is always right. So, but things have changed, so we have to move on. Technology has given us the opportunity to have a better outreach, and because of that, we are able to gather more information to help us with decision making and even in planning our fiscal policy. You can find out that there are a lot of issues in particular about cost of living, about poverty, about despite the fact that we have actually successfully rolled out the right economic plan to ensure that we manage to elevate many from poverty rate. Our poverty rate is less than 10%, but to me it's not so much of poverty here we're talking about. It's largely about hardship. Hardship because the thing is, many people are in denial that your lifestyle has changed. Everybody wants a smartphone. Students want a smartphone, and they keep saying that the government's not giving us enough. In actual fact, during our school days, that's more than enough. But because you need a handphone, you need an additional cost to support, the use of a smartphone. So, but we are worried that smartphone is a very important tool these days. I give instructions to my officers through the smartphone, so do my boss. So things get done very fast, things move very fast. But at the same time, we still have to sort of sit back and think carefully. How do we want to react to certain instructions? It's important because in the government you cannot simply be too action oriented. You have the governance that you have to look into. So we always, we will have our engagement, our mini WhatsApp group. Okay, guys, say what's happening, why is this coming out? We have a lot of social media also coming in, and that cause a lot of disruption. Some can be just spooking. Just one statement can actually even spook the stock market. God, they have to react. These are really challenging times. We are not operating as what we used to, which back in my early years of service is a lot of paperwork. Okay, how do we, applications, how do you address this, and we have our guidelines. But nowadays it's different. So we need to make changes. We have to change along with whatever changes that's coming. I like the word about, you mentioned this about remote leadership. Yeah, that's how we've been operating all the while. There's no such thing as, you need to gather together in one place. You can always do con call or, video call. So that's how things have been operating, whether in the, I don't know whether, but in private, I'm sure that, it operates the same way. But that's what we are doing in the public sector as well. And the other issue is, being in the public sector, we have to be, we still have that bureaucracy to ensure that, we're not crossing the boss territory. He is still the boss, wherever it is, you need to get his approval. So it's just not about policy matters, but it's also about operational matters sometimes. Because you won't see the damages until you make that you call it silly mistake. And with the government, it's difficult to jump. You cannot be jumpy. You have to, really take all the information in and then have a discussion and how do you want to go about it. So I may not be answering your question, but I'm just telling about what's happening as a public sector servant. But despite that, we always are mindful that whenever we want to react, it must be on the basis of facts and information. So we must get our facts correct, so that the information or whatever advices that we give is not distorted. So it's important that to be on your toes on what's the latest development. You must know what's the rate of our inflation rate at the moment. What's the employment rate at the moment. So what's the stock market? What is the level of the stock market at the moment? So what is causing our ringgit to depreciate? At this hour. So these things have actually keep us. These dynamic changes has keep us, excited about things. So I'm never bored, to be honest, with my work. I actually enjoyed it despite the challenges, but I suppose there's no fun in there's no challenges. I just cannot work in an environment which is too rigid and too, what do you call that, repetitive. So these are the things that's happening in the public sector. You can always throw questions and I'll try to answer. I don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Datuk Siti. And thank you for representing well in terms of the public sector. I think most of us would like to know more about it, right? What's going on, especially nowadays, after the new government. Yeah. So I'm always very curious, and I think most of us are, what's happening. All right, Dato' Ong. Okay. In the banking industry and also in other industries too, if you want to share, what are the challenges and the opportunities of the 21st century leadership, and how do you lead the change and the culture? How do you maintain or drive the culture in that sense?
Okay, thank you so much. We talked about leadership, and one thing I want to stress is that people always associate leadership with position, but I'm a great believer that leadership is all about yourself. That means you can start as a fresh grad, or you could even work as a cleaner, and you have practiced self-leadership. That means you know what you need to do, and you can help people along the way. So I think that's something that we all need to do, because in a big organization, you really need everybody to practice this. Because gone are the days where leaders shout and give certain direction and they expect everybody to follow, because everybody to a certain extent have their own agenda and their own plans. Now, in order for you to actually motivate a lot of people, you need to inculcate something that strikes out for them, something that really speaks the truth. And I saw a lot of words out there, but I didn't see some very traditional words like steadfastness, patience. You don't see that anymore, because that's unfortunately, is it there?
No.
No,
It's
right?
because now the
Yeah.
generation.
And that's the reality of dealing in the 21st century. Even if you look at the current government, if you remember a year ago when Tun Mahathir came out on stage, I think it was just before the polls, he had a gathering and he said that you have to make sacrifices. But you can see that currently quite a number of people have become disenchanted. The Pakatan Harapan's popular vote has come down tremendously. And just by judging the by-elections, they are going the other way. And that's because people are generally, the reality of things is that when you want to make changes in a big country organization, it doesn't happen immediately. And I think Dato' Siti will say that they're doing a lot of things, but people react to a lot of things. Social media, currency, stock market, everything. So as a leader, one of the things that, I come from the banking industry, so just early this week, I was attending a banking summit. And of course, the buzzword is fintech and will the banks become a dinosaur? And as a banking practitioner, although I will be retiring soon, I actually told many people in the audience, because many of them are also young, they're young bankers, and also probably have children who may aspire to be in the banking industry. I said that whatever digital disruption that's going to come your way is not going to take away the human touch. There's another thing that you don't see up there. When in every organization, even when you want to influence people, you realize that the human touch is so critical. And I think one of the things that we want to inculcate in young people is that, yes, you want to be out there, you want to say the right things, but there is this face-to-face engagement that you must have with people. And banking will always have this very important element when you want to do something important with the bank. Yes, true, when you want to transfer a few $100s, a few $1,000s to another account, you don't want to face anybody. Or you want to take cash, you don't need to go to a teller. But when you want to make a big investment, you want to see somebody. And if you want to take a loan, I think you want to see somebody, right? So I think in essence, the 21st century where we use a lot of technology, AI, data, scientists and all that, yes, that's important, but don't forget the human element. And one of the most important things that we have to remember, we have 7.7 billion people in this world. If machines will start doing all these things, what will happen to jobs? What will happen to the young people who come into? If you look at some of the places where we always look and emulate, South Korea for instance, the youth unemployment is tremendously high, and they are one of the most technological savvy countries. Now, this is something that we have to be very mindful, and how to make sure that when we move towards the 21st century, when we embrace digital and technological changes, we must not forget the human touch, and how we can actually work together to exist and to grow this ecosystem that we exist in this world, man and machine.
Thank you, Mr. Ong. Very insightful. Thank you. You have done your homework too, right? Yes. Thank you for that, and thank you for sharing us in terms of the banking industry. That my friend was also mentioning about the dinosaur aspect of banking, and now I can tell her back. Thank you. All right. Now, Najib. Okay, ready, yeah? All right, in terms of leading change in the 21st century leadership and in the world of digital age, like Dr. Ong already mentioned about in the digital arena. So what are your experiences?
It's quite interesting to hear the rest of the panelists speak. I suppose in a sense they are all in a way institutional, right? It's institution of education, institution of government, institution of banking. One of the biggest things that I've seen, so when I started Strand, I had 4 guys, and I had to train these 4 guys who would come back from the UK. They had done 2 or 3 years of work, and then they joined us. But the work that we were doing was at a certain level where they couldn't really function. So literally, the first job I had was trainer, on top being photocopy boy and payroll manager and so on and so forth, right? So, as I grew, then I realized that we were beginning to develop a system of developing people, right? Because the kind of people that we needed to develop were leaders from the outset. Because all of our work, our job was every day at 4 o'clock to tell the Europeans what to do. Because they would manufacture and we would design, right? So we swapped the thing around. And what I noticed at the early stages is that the effect of the rote learning in the Malaysian education system is quite pronounced. Okay, so in rote learning, for example, in a classroom, right, you sit in the class. The smartest kid is the first kid to raise their hands, right? When the teacher asks the question, always rewarded that kid. The guy at the back who's thinking about it is slow, right? Now, the problem is that that's a test of reflexes, not a test of intelligence. And for 18 years of my life, that was reinforced. So when I started hiring people, what happens when I do the interview? The smart ones are the ones who try and answer the question before I finish even asking them. So what was interesting was that there was this completely divorced way of conceptualizing information and then creating value from it. So the other thing I found with Malaysians, and I've further found with a lot of Southeast Asians, was the concept of value is not there. There's a concept of doing a job, right? Here's a checklist, memorize it. You can make a really long checklist, Malaysia will memorize it, right? And then he will regurgitate it for the rest of his life and think that he's actually done a job. So that kind of mentality becomes a major challenge, I think, in the technological age. Major challenge. So leadership, I think if I pick up from some of the audience members saying, leadership in this age is not top down, it's bottom up. So I remember when I was in Derby with Rolls-Royce, they showed the organization structure. They called it the reverse pyramid, right? So they had the CEO at the bottom and the technician at the top. Right? So all the big mass of people at the top and the CEO right at the bottom. And the way they explained it was that the technician's the only person who adds value. Everybody else is supporting that guy. In the Malaysian context, that would never survive, right? The guy at the bottom is the guy at the bottom. And if it's in a factory, he almost never has a chance to go beyond a certain level in the factory as a technical person. He'll always progress. So classic Malaysian graduate, I want to do 3 years engineering, then I want to go into management. Right? Because they see that as a career path. Hence why we don't really progress as a technological country. So we are the backyard of everybody, right? So FDI is the order of the day in the country. So at the moment, I'm writing the industrial roadmap for the state of Selangor. I was contracted by the Chief Minister. And it's looking at the 5 major Industry 4.0 sectors: aerospace, medical devices, electrical electronics, machinery equipment, and biotechnology. And as I'm doing this, I'm going into deep study of each one of these fields, right? What you see is the level of disruption that's actually happening right now in terms of the business models. And I think this is where I don't think the Malaysians in general are not ready. So we've been trained as institutional people to go into institutions. We've not been trained to become entrepreneurs. So I had this massive argument with my dad, I think a few months ago. So I asked him to, he's a really experienced HR guy, so I asked him to come into the office and do some talks with my guys, and he said, millennials, they don't work very hard, not committed, they don't want to put in the hours, And I flipped it on him, which I always do, unfortunately with my father. I said, the problem is you guys, right? He said, what do you mean? He says, what happened right after independence? You went straight back and asked a job from the guy who was just here, right? That's what you did. You went back and you said, Pricewaterhouse come and set up, I listened at the time, please set up and give me a job. Next guy, please give me a job, give me a job, give me a job. So you just wanted to work for them. Now you come to a level where the cost in the country cannot support the level of value that you're creating, which is effectively a back office type of function. So these guys are now saying, actually, we need more value, we need to move out of here. If you want cost, I go to Bangladesh. If I got 60% of my staff in the factory from Bangladesh, my factory should be in Bangladesh. Right? Simple maths. Okay? So they're now going out, and now you've got this bunch of millennials that are running around going, where do we work? And apparently, you're supposed to be an entrepreneur. Ask your mom and dad how to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, there you go. So it's your problem, because now these people all have to figure it out and create the GDP that the Ministry of Finance needs to depend on, right? So I think the situation now is quite critical. So I was shown this, one of the works I was doing is with some economists. So there's a double dip in the economy. So there was a 97 crisis where we lost the capacity of purchasing because of the ringgit's devaluation, we pegged it against the dollar. But they showed me this next curve down. So the parabolic is now going to happen 2019, 2020, 2021, something like this, right? And this parabolic is going to be due to the lack of capability. So we will not have the capability because our cost structure doesn't work anymore. And this thing is going to fall off the curve unless we suddenly build up capabilities. So when you go to Taiwan, Japan, and Korea, and so on and so forth, you do not see foreign multinationals. It's Taiwanese multinationals, Japanese multinationals, Korean multinationals. So it's right after the Second World War. These guys started from sewing factories to become Honda, to become Kawasaki and all these companies, right? Now we don't have that. MRD should have been Monsanto by now. Yeah, but it's not. Right? It's still a research agency. So now we are stuck with this situation, I think, where we actually cannot create enough value. And it's unfortunate that I have to see this at the front because I have to now train a whole bunch of people who have no context, effectively, because they come out of university, whatever it is, they think they are going into a large organization, and these organizations are now breaking apart, right? So I've done some work with Honeywell and GE and these guys. I've done quite a few GLC turnkey projects. I helped UMAAM go into aerospace. And studying the construct, if you look at a board of any GLC here, it primarily consists of accountants and lawyers. Right? So try and convince an accountant and lawyer about going into a high-tech, high-risk investment. Yeah. So the only argument I have is it's for your children's future. Because the rest of it is, it doesn't make any sense to most of them. So you look at the constitution of the boards as well, it is not current to what it is that Malaysia is going into next. So in summary, I think the challenges are the country is not ready. This thing is coming faster than a speeding bullet, right? Complexity is the order of the day. So a lot of people think, Malaysians like to have order and structure. What's coming is complex, and it's going to be very difficult to manage if you're going to manage it as a large institution. You're going to have agile, smaller organizations, which are all led by leaders all over the place, right? Smaller groups, and these guys have to create value and try and become something that is competitive. So I think the last note, I was the Machinery Equipment Industry Federation, AGM, just recently. So if you just imagine there's 6,000 companies in this federation. And you know, if the kind of companies, you go to Balakong, right? Yeah, also all those manufacturing companies, family owned, yeah. Probably now, I think usually it's only one generation. So usually the dad was working with Intel or something like that, as a machinist or some sort of operator. Besides, I think I can take a risk, goes to the bank, gets a bank loan, buys the first machine, goes back to his previous employer and says, I can do this for 15% cheaper, please give me the work. So this would have happened in the 80s, right? And this guy then did the work, got some money, took the next loan, next machine. I'm sure you've seen this again and again. He's now got maybe 50, 100 machines, he's a multi-millionaire. So he was Form 5 educated or maybe even diploma educated. Then he sends his kid overseas to Australia or the US, whatever, comes back and says, Dad, I don't want to go into the factory, right? Because I don't work with all those Bangladeshis, right? I'm a high-powered guy now. So I think more than 50% of these factories are just going to close instantly, right? There will be no handover. That's 30% of our GDP. That is 30% of our GDP. So the rest of it is some sort of back-end or some multinational who's beginning to lose interest in the fact that there's no cost advantage of being here, right? So with that kind of scenario, where was I going with that? So I think with that kind of scenario, you find that the leadership, I think, for the next generation is going to be challenging, and the key came when one of the guys on the board of the MEIF said that they just come back from One Belt, One Road, right, or BOR. So I think it was Muhiba Engineering. So they sent cranes and all sorts of big equipment there, right? And they said, hey guys, by the way, we just got back. And they said, if you want to continue working with us, we have to change the way we work. I said, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, we don't buy equipment anymore, we buy services. Right? So if you're selling a crane, your invoice used to say crane, 5 cranes, right? And so your factory is set up to make as cheap as possible this crane, to make as much margin as possible and then sell it over to China. Now China says, I don't buy cranes, I want to buy the service of cranes. So I want to buy crane hours. I saw a German company one time where they make drills, right? So they used to sell drills. Now guess what they sell? Holes. So the invoice says 40,000 holes for that house, right? So these guys are going, oh, how do we deal with this? You know, because actually what they couldn't quite grasp the fact that they're not buying products anymore, they're buying services. And if I'm providing the service of a crane, do I need to create a cheap crane or a crane that I can amortize over a 30-year period with a service life that I can then modularize as well, right? And that's blowing their brains, right? And in China, you see them switching like this, right? So that's where I think technology really is hitting us. So we're getting very distracted by IoT, cloud, 3D printing and all this. But the underlying thing is the fundamental change in the business model, which changed everything from the point of technology to the financing of the business.
Enlightening fundamental change of business model, the entire value chain have disrupted. Thank you, Najib. That's why you're here. All right, we are at halfway of the forum. I would like to take the opportunity to ask, and then we can proceed. Dear panelists, is there any question that you would love to ask any of the panelists specifically? All right, Shazlan.
My name is Wan Ahmad. I would like to ask Mr. Rakim. So, and it's actually an anthropological issue, basically. So how do you, I don't know how to think about it. Because what happened to me was I retired at 58. When you are 50, you never live before after 25. 25, you never live past 40. 40, you never live past 60, but now I'm 64. So, I start thinking about the future, and I think my diagnosis is the same as yours. Essentially, Malaysia is becoming very irrelevant. Southeast Asia is actually going to be the next, the next big thing that's going to happen in the world. But Malaysia, I think, is completely out of whack with almost everything, culturally, mentally, politically. We just got about 30 years of not doing anything. So, from an anthropological point of view, there's something has to change. Yeah. So, I think politicians are basically, they're just not up to the job. Our businessmen are basically so cost driven that they do not see beyond cost. So people like you who are sort of thinking outside the box is the kind of people that we actually need to get we basically need to revolutionize something. And I'm sitting here at 64 years old. I got some money left, so what do I do for the next 3 years? So I like to, basically I think it's an anthropological issue. It's how to, because I don't know anthropology, but from what you say is that basically you need some kind of a paradigm shift in terms of your cultural development so that you can actually go into business not from the traditional thinking. And then move forward. So I just want to hear your view.
Yeah, so I think you're
Sorry, can I say something? By the way, my friend here, Wanaman, we were in Manchester in the year 70, we finished 78. By the way, he did chemical engineering, but when he got back, he didn't do any oil and gas stuff, He ended up as a stockbroker.
And who are you, sir?
My name is Ahmad. I did computer science and accounting at Owens, if you know Owens, University of Manchester. Normally we look at a certain way on people from UMAAM.
I don't think there was a question there, right? Yeah, you're right. In fact, so some of the early work that we did, because we then began work with Mara as part of the scaling up of my company and then other aerospace companies. So initially, Strand, when we did the interviews, right? So I have an interview process which I don't discriminate people with degrees, no degrees, whatever it is, right? So I look at the cover letter and if it impresses me, we will interview the person, right? And initially, what we realized that we were picking people from a certain demographic, right? These people were already empowered, they were already clear, sufficiently clear in their thinking, they had some leadership qualities, and usually because their parents came from a certain type of background, middle high-ranking government servants, teachers, professionals, or business people, right? Then later on, we started working with College Kemahiran Tinggi Mara, which there are, I think, something like 20-something of them all over the country. And then we began to get the people who were sons of fishermen, daughters of farmers, and stuff like that. And so we got KITA, the anthropological department of the University of Kebangsaan Malaysia. Interestingly, just on a side note on that one, I brought 20 companies to Airbus in Toulouse to go to the Airbus University where they teach how to become an Airbus supplier, right? So these are companies trying to transform. And the Airbus University has been designed so that it's inclusive to everyone in the world, right? So the design is very specific. And what's interesting is that the organization that won that design was UKM. So University Kebangsaan Malaysia designed the Airbus University in Toulouse, right? So in fact, Malaysian culture is highly inclusive, right? So what is a Malay? If you can define that, good luck to you, right? I don't think you can define it genetically very easily. So when we started looking down into the guys who are outside of the normal circle we would hire from, we found that the gaps in terms of their social mobility, their social circles, the levers that we had to push were completely different. It was very good to get KITA to actually do this analysis on about 300 Malaysian students, right? So in order to then get them to a certain level, you had to realize that you had to push different levers with them as opposed to the people that you would normally deal with. And this is the problem, right? we tend to approach everybody with the same approach. Yeah? And so we miss, first of all, a lot of this underlying talent that could be there that we don't spend enough time to mature. So yes, it's an anthropological problem because we're actually very concentric, you know. So I was reading Levi Strauss today and studying how they how the different tribes were organized, and you know the social circles and so on and so forth, right? So somewhere the social power is very central, were concentric circles, right? And then where some were more disparate, they were more grid-like type circles, right? Constructs. So I think your point that we have to really look at this from the fundamentals of what are people made of is very true. But what we don't do in Malaysia is we don't put enough understanding and emphasis on that side of learning. Everything is on engineering, technical, computing, and so on and so forth. The fourth industrial revolution, in fact, is the understanding of the other side of things, because actually it's about value creation. So if you don't understand which value you're trying to create, right? So now people don't chase capital anymore. I think first, second, third industrial revolution, everybody chased capital. Now capital you can get like this, right? So OCBC is not the only place you can get capital, right? You can get capital anywhere. People are. So now what you have to have is market. And market, as was described, has to be ubiquitous. You know, so how big and how inclusive a market can you get? Right? That's Grab, that's Uber, right? So I think understanding, that's what I mean by complexity. It's from your anthropological consideration right up to the market dynamics, right up to the technologies that will enable the new value systems. You know, you have a very complex landscape where what you need to be able to do as someone functioning in there is have the right kind of capabilities and skill sets. Right? And be able, and that is actually the agility and the adaptability. That's the number one requirement for employment in the 21st century. Right? It's not because any mathematical skills and all can be enhanced by a computer. So does that answer?
Yeah, I just want to add, actually, you know, if you on a valuation basis, if you go on a forward valuation basis, I think a lot of companies will be undervalued for a very long time. If you look at the stock market valuation now, it's actually quite low. So it's been low for, before I retired, it was really low. After I retired, it's even lower. So basically, people are no longer valuing enterprise in the old ways. Because I look at my sons, you know, these guys, they're very agile. They're very agile and they're very empowered and they're very motivated. They're not scared about the future. But you talk about people over 50 or 60, they're very depressed. Yeah, because they only see things from their own perspective. Whereas these young guys have a completely different way of, it's the way that they learn, I suppose, you know. And they look at things very differently. So that's why I was saying earlier, when I look at this, you know, it's very optimistic. It's you know, the word that comes out is very optimistic. If you go and read YouTube, you go and read all these locals, they're all very depressed. They're very scared of artificial intelligence, what this going to job. You know, but basically that's because the white people, they've been running the world for so long. Now the Chinese are doing all the AI, they think that the Chinese are going to do, you know, it's going to rule over them. So actually, you know, it's just like mother thinking, right? And also, if you look at the way the economy is moving, South Asia is going to be this part of the world that if Malaysia is not very careful, we are going to miss out on this tremendous growth potential. But as China consolidates, when they consolidate, it doesn't mean that they go bankrupt. It just means that the activity will improve. So we'll be the part that actually, you know, if China were to start developing their military industrial complex and all this this part of the world is going to actually, you know, tap into that kind of growth. So this way, I think Malaysia is, to me, as you say, like either we miss it or we probably miss it. I think.
Okay. So I think what if I would summarize it, I think going forward, we don't look at companies anymore. As an investor, that's what you used to look at companies. You look at markets and you look at capabilities and investees. So in fact, the only thing we have to lose now is our Southeast Asian market to someone else.
Yeah, Najib, I just want to intervene a bit. Because as a government, it is my concern as to how the government is able to devise or formulate the right approaches to how to take Malaysia ahead. Now, you're talking about more entrepreneurial scheme rather than starting a business. That entrepreneurship and also entrepreneurship as versus to being a business person is totally a different concept. I mean, these are the young people. So I'm the oldest, honestly. I'm the what they call baby boomers, and I think they are the group, the Gen Y, the Gen Z, who are coming up with a lot of value creations. Now, I don't know how I'm gonna tap information or your thoughts in the coming budget. We must find ways of how to actually create more values in the economy rather than doing things the old way. Because year in, year out, as I see it, the budget has been designed to actually address about operating expenditure and development expenditure. And we've been offering so many incentives in the market, but no takers. My God, we keep giving grants and yet they're not taking it. Simply because the likes of trying to mechanize your operations. It's just that probably it's the children, inheriting their parents' business. They're not interested. And they say, why should I spend so much? Borrow from Dato' Ong, and at the end of the day, there's no market for my products. It's out of fashion. I'm not gonna, land with this debt. So things have changed tremendously, and how the economy is gonna be evolved will no longer be the likes of the factories that we see around. So Najib, you just wait for my invitation for the next budget consultation. Okay, that was wonderful.
Before everyone gets too depressed, I'd like to say something that if you sort of listen to what Warren Buffett said recently, that he was an idiot for not investing in Amazon, right? And he recently invested in Amazon. I don't think it was him, it was actually one of his portfolio managers. And I think he became a fan of Apple a couple of years ago. But he's always been a fan of old-fashioned industries. Ice cream, carpet makers, tomato sauce producer. And actually these are the bread and butter. I think what we need to realize is that we have to coexist with changes in the world. I work in OCBC, the second largest financial services group in Southeast Asia. We look at Andy with Grab, a company that doesn't make money, but constantly can get capital. They don't even need ROE, and constantly we are measured by, we must return ROE of 12%. That means we must make actual money, But the valuations have actually changed. And I think to a certain extent, the valuation is very, very different now. Uber is now going to be IPO. It's going to be valued at about $90 billion US. What Uber can create is, from some of the data, is that, okay, it's got 3.9 million drivers worldwide. So that means the impact that Uber has is tremendous. So people are now actually valuing impact. It's no longer return on investment, but maybe return on impact. And what you can do with the platform that you have. Banks and traditional companies are one of those that are unable to really take advantage of this, partly because of the way they have actually started. Most banks or most big companies started life looking at businesses, and then they use technology, IT to help them. Whereas most of these companies that are changing the world, they start with technology and how can technology solve the business problem. So they come from a different angle altogether. So that's why when we talk about banks fearing fintech, we're actually not the fintech, because the fintech all love us. They're all very small guys, and they all want to be partnering with banks. The ones that we fear actually is the tech fins. That means the Alibaba, the Amazon, because they started as a technology company. And they want to, as they get bigger and bigger and have more and more customers, they want to do the same thing. Now, I'm also on the CGC board, and what we're trying to do, like Dr. Siti said, the government is trying so hard to give loans, SME loans, and every bank out there is saying, okay, we want to give money. But true is that I think our kids are generally quite spoiled. Many of them do not want to get their hands dirty. The parents have a difficult time, especially if they are a manufacturer, to get them interested. But we also do see some where the children are joining. But sadly, Malaysia is always the country that wants to invest in something that is easy, doesn't require a lot of hard work. And that's why I think that's something that we should worry about. But as we move into, every country that develops, you'll find that manufacturing becomes less of important, just like the US. I think manufacturing is probably like 20-30%. The rest is services, making movies, restaurants, and all that. So you would expect some of this to change. We can no longer just depend on manufacturing to really support. And actually, manufacturing is one of the worst type of thing because there will be always countries that are cheaper than you. But if you have a good service industry, if you have got good hotels, good tourist spots, and this is not something that people can compete against. And so I think Malaysia, if you think about it, we should reinvent ourselves in things that is not easy to compete against, the experience. And this is what a lot of people nowadays talk about, the experience of something, whether it's a restaurant, is it a country, or is it doing something crazy. Thanks.
So I'm listening to the conversation from the perspective of somebody who works in an organisation that in a few years' time will be celebrating its 200th anniversary. And that's a challenge because universities, like other big institutions, they've been around for a long time and they hope to be around for a long time as well. And both across the public and the private sector, the challenge for very big established organisations is how do they stay entrepreneurial? Because as organisations become established, they often become more bureaucratic, they become hierarchical, they have ways of doing things. And the challenge for big organisations, particularly when they've got startups around them, is how do they continue to adapt and change and to foster innovation within large organisations. And that's something I know that I've had to think about a lot more, in part because of technological advances that is having a major impact on the delivery of teaching and learning. We're seeing the growth of distance learning, of blended learning, so that education is not just about people coming to a campus, it's also about how we go out and deliver teaching and learning in remotely, just as we were talking about earlier about management being remote or leadership being remote in different organisations. So one of the challenges for me is, as I say, I work in a very big organisation. I will continue probably to see out my career there, is how to have an organisation that is innovative at every level and creating the conditions where people feel that they can innovate. So all the time it's thinking within the organisation, how can we be more efficient and effective about what we do? How do we get innovations in our new processes and our everyday practices, encouraging everybody at every level to think in that sort of way. It's not just people at the top telling other people to do these things, but creating the conditions where people think about doing things differently. And as I say, that is challenging in established organisations that have acquired lots of things along the way and along their history, while new startup companies often started at a particular point of time. They don't have all this baggage, And these are some of the things that I think organisations, both across the public and the private sector, have to think about, and the leaders within those organisations, because big organisations won't disappear, they will take many different forms, but how some of those big organisations in the future, whether it's universities, whether it's banks or whatever, as established players in their fields, how do they respond to the changing conditions, to the start-up companies around them? Those are really important questions that all of us have to ask, and this is why leadership is so important in organisation, because most countries, of course, want entrepreneurs, but they want people in organisations to be entrepreneurial as well.
Thank you, Prof. Fiona. Any more questions? Oh, all right. Gentleman over there, then we'll take yours.
My name is Ken. I'm a returned expatriate. I used to work in Australia for 6 years. Now I moved back and worked in Malaysia for about 3 years now. One of the challenges that I see returning back from Australia and working back in Malaysia on the transportation projects is the challenges of dealing with high power distance within the corporate itself, especially myself, which is in the middle management. I remember proposing a proposal, and I have used big words like, these are the things that we need to implement because this is how things are done in the military sectors, in the transportations. So we need to use big words like this. So the problem that I face with leadership is paradox. We constantly need to deal with the high power distance and the people below us, right? How do we empower them? So when I get the proposal through, so the next challenge is, wow, you are good in this. How about you go and do this, right? But if I do it myself, then I don't have the opportunity to empower my staff, right? So I refuse to take on the jobs because I just say, we need to hire people, right? So being in the sandwich level is not easy. So what would be your advice, especially now, my next proposal with the company is transportation projects, right? So in the town hall meeting, so I raised, look, if we need to cut costs, we need to look at how we run our procurement. If we keep outsourcing jobs and we are not doing the job ourselves, how are we going to drive value, align to the government, and at the same time empower the people beneath us, right? So there is a gap. There is a gap between the middle management, what we want to drive, and the people in the board. How they see they can create value and align to the new 21st century leaderships. Okay.
Thank you, Ben. Who would like you to attention to? Is there anyone specific?
Anyone, because it's a paradox. How do you do paradox?
Shall I start? So a phrase that immediately comes to mind with one of the issues that you raised in terms of being in middle management, which is often a very challenging position to be in. It's a turn of phrase that we use often in big organisations in the UK. Effectively, I am also a middle manager, I have levels above me, is that you have to educate upwards. Is be talking to people above you all the time about some of the challenges. We were talking earlier about inverting the hierarchy and the technical person being at the top and the CEO at the bottom. And it's really important to be educating upwards, to talking to your bosses about some of the challenges and so on that you're confronting. Sometimes when you're in the middle or on the ground, you really see the issues as they are. And you've got to have those conversations and be persuading your bosses and your people above you to pick up some of those challenges. Another issue that I often think about as well, in terms of both managing people but also being managed myself, is sometimes it's best to go with the solutions to the problems as well as the problems themselves, so that when you're talking to your bosses above you, sometimes the solutions can be found on the ground as well. So the boss up there doesn't always, indeed often doesn't have the answers to the questions that you're posing him or her. And the key is to be really thinking about, well, actually I am the boss, I can see this issue needs to be changed, this is what I think the answers are, and you go and tell your boss that you think these would be the solutions, and this is where you create the value, isn't it? So you have to boss your boss, really. But sometimes, that it's very important is to go in and say, these are the set of issues that I'm currently confronting in my job, but these are what I think are the solutions to the issues. And if you have a sensible boss, that person will be listening to what you're saying, your expertise, your narrative, and thinking about how they can embrace some of the things that you say. So don't underestimate all the time the importance of having those conversations, talking to the people above you about some of the challenges and coming up with ideas all the time, because they do get taken up. And sometimes people often think in organisations that they don't have very much power. But actually sometimes, people's ideas do get taken up. They do get taken up regularly. If somebody comes to me and says something that is hugely sensible, why would I not do it? So, that's what I encourage my staff to do, is to come to me, tell me, give me ideas, how they want to run things, empower people, and then also be talking to colleagues above you about those issues.
Probably, I missed out your name just now.
My name is Ken.
Ken.
Yeah.
Okay, Ken. If you can find someone in your organization who can buy in your views and ideas, and then, because not all leaders are good listeners, honestly. They are so caught up with so many other issues that they put priorities. Sometimes their priorities might be wrong. It's not for the organization, but more for their personal interest, And the important is, who can you identify in the organization who are good listeners, who also understand where your technical proposal. Then if you could get the buy-in and the support from him, probably that's an easier way for you to escalate your views and ideas. I understand in the likes of a public sector, it's very difficult to flow the ideas bottom up. It's always like top down. But there are ways of doing it, but sometimes it's going to take a long time. Just when we at the government thought we got a new government, so we have a lot of ideas on things to do to actually improve the governance. But it's always like pushing, the ideas doesn't seem to be able to penetrate to the top. It is a challenge. It is a challenge actually, but you must never give up if it brings values to the organization. Good luck to you, honestly.
The high power distance in Malaysia is really challenging, and at the same time it's very fun. Comparing to how me and my team deliver the biggest robots that's running on Earth now. It's a 2.4 kilometer train that's fully autonomous now. It's a project funded by Rio Tinto, in the private sector. In fact, I do believe Malaysia, we don't lack talent. In that project, the people who went on site together with me, most of them are Malaysian, but only me myself are returning back to Malaysia. Yeah. So there are a lot of challenges. I guess you can see from my emotion. There are a lot of challenges, a lot of frustrations going on. The government is trying to reduce costs. The private sectors are trying their best to fit in the budgets dictated by the government, right? So between the line where the private sector is trying to cut profit, at the same time trying to meet the obligations of the government, there is where our jobs becomes very, very challenging. We are trying to do the best that we can, but there is a budget constraint, and there is a lack and culture conflict. Yeah, that we are so used to outsourcing jobs, get other consultants to do the jobs for us, instead of us who has the skill and capability to do it ourselves. So there is a lack of challenge and understanding from the management to empower people who know how to do things and leave it for the people who know how things should be done the best. Not the finance people, not the accountant who is doing all the calculations at the board of management, because at the end of the day, the people that is going to execute the jobs are the people at the bottom. That is where I think the next 21st century leadership needs to change their mindset. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Good, Ken. I think all organizations face challenges on cost. So I think if you talk about the senior management, including the board of directors, everybody realizes it's an issue. Everybody wants to manage that the best way they can. And I think for people stuck in the middle, whether you're with the company or you are a consultant, I think your job is quite tough because you're trying to manage the seniors and deliver what they want. At the same time, you're trying to overcome some of the fear, whether it's a private contractor, because they know that cost means lower profits. It's always like that. I think whenever you want to implement change that is painful, I think the most important thing is the communication. And you need to also, at the same time, sit down with them to create some environment where ideas can come from them, whether it's existing workers that you have. Because sometimes when we talk about technology and cost, automatically in people's mind is that I'm going to be out of a job. The company is going to automate. I've actually gone into factories where the bosses show me, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to replace the labor. And he's talking like this in front of all the workers. So you can imagine how it is so difficult to do some of these things. And I also, when I was really on the front line, I visited companies in China almost like 20 years ago. And one of the challenges some of these companies tell me is that, we want to improve technology and automate. But in China, they want employment. So they will never be encouraged to do that. But guess what? Actually, China is the biggest investor in robotics because they very quickly embrace the change. And very soon, I think it's how you actually communicate. And it's important to also, to a certain extent, celebrate some of the small, significant wins. Because sometimes you want a big number, but it's not going to come so easily. Let's say you want to reduce cost 10%. If you can celebrate 1% reduction and you tell people, how did we achieve that? I think then you increase that kind of good spirit, positivity, like all you see up there. This is what we need. I think challenges is actually very good, because it helps you to come up with something that you never did before. But always don't forget that ideas actually come from the bottom up, not always from the top. The top only have a result that they want. Okay.
Sorry, yeah. So I'll just add a little bit there. Right? I think from my point of view, because I do a lot of consulting for companies, right? One of the things that I try to identify very quickly is whether or not the CEO has a cost problem, an operational problem, or a strategic problem, right? And my usual conclusion is that most of our CEOs only understand cost problems. Right? Sometimes most of them don't come from operations, so they don't understand operational problems, right? Operational problems is somebody else's problem, right? So it's only a cost problem. But most of the time, what they actually have is what you're saying, Ken. It's a strategic problem. So they have a challenge in a cost down on a project that has been costed for a certain amount, right? And now it's come down to a level where the parameters of the project have changed fundamentally. So now you need a different strategy, right? So your issue is going to be trying to talk to strategy to a guy who only knows how to understand cost, right? That's where your problem is, okay? So practically, don't speak a different language to that guy. Yeah, you have to somehow turn your problem into their problem. Okay, that's the only way you get engagement, I found. And eventually, if through the process you can educate them to your line of thinking, now this is really you charting your path to become the CEO of that company, effectively, because you may actually have changed the whole way that this company actually operates. If you're able, from your point, actually change the way that the company thinks from a cost to a strategic sort of outlook, right? And I think this is my advice to a lot of the younger guys who are now in sort of middle management. You have to have that ambition, because most of your companies cannot survive the way they are today. They can't, right? They're going to come under continuous pressure, and most of the board and the management is not equipped to handle what is coming. So eventually they're going to have to hand it over to someone, right? And that someone could be you.
All right. Yes. Due to time constraint, we just take one last one. Miss?
Thank you. So I just would like to bounce back on this idea of paradox. And you mentioned the risk of Malaysia and the Malaysian workforce not being ready for the future. For me, this is a huge paradox, because again, I've been here for 4 years and I'm really wondering what's wrong, because Malaysia has an ideal position in Southeast Asia. We have so many different cultures and skills and way of working that we can combine to make such powerful, diversified team. People are educated, they speak perfect English, they go overseas, you have like an industry and technology. So for me, I don't understand what's lacking. But from my experience, and from everything that you're saying as well, and your experience from managing Malaysian and other cultures in the region, it's a question of agility, posture, proactivity, entrepreneurship. Not entrepreneurship in the sense of building new companies, but in terms of mindset. So now I have a very specific question. Do you have any tip on how to give or insufflate or give the ability of people to be proactive and to give ideas? Because again, an example, I'm very positive, and I'm a very participative management, and I applied my Western management style. And my team, when I started asking them questions and asking them, how can we solve these problems? Can you take that? Can you take ownership of that action? You're responsible. What do you think? They freak out, because they're not used to it. So probably due to education, because they are taught to, just apply what they are told to do, or maybe because of habit, the boss is right. So maybe I thought when I asked them questions, they thought, oh, maybe my boss is going to test me, And so yeah, so a very specific tip, because we all think it's important, and those are not hard skills. It's not something you learn at school. It's something that you learn in the work environment. So do you have any tips on how to encourage your team members to speak out, to share ideas, and to be proactive for better change?
You mind if I'll do. Why? Because I have to face this every day. So one of the biggest problems, right? Being a Malaysian myself, okay, so I'm going to put myself in that problem, right? I'm not divorced from that problem. Is that we don't communicate very well in any language. Okay, now let me quantify that, right? So in Malaysia now, there's a lot of emphasis on English language, and the solving of the English language will solve all the problems. Everybody can speak English, we'll all be able to suddenly, mature and progress. The problem is actually not the language in which we communicate, it's how we communicate, right? Malaysians generally don't communicate well, okay? So most of our communication is social. So if you ever seen a bunch of Malaysians try and plan a night out, alright? Okay, so they'll be like, oh, let's go, and suddenly they'll all end up in the same place. Okay? don't know what the plan was, right? But somehow socially, this very organic, inaccurate conversation happens to be inclusive. It gets everybody comfortable, that everybody's contributed to the end state of where we're going to go, and so on and so forth. But this doesn't work in a business and an engineering and technical environment, because you have to be very clear what you're saying. And you need to say something and somebody else builds on what you're saying, and then you build it. This interaction is completely alien to Malaysia, right? Completely. So the first thing I tended to do was get them to speak slower first. So they like to speak very fast, okay? So like that reflex I was saying, right? The first thing they do is, oh, before you finish your question, here's all the answers. Or here's all the data in my head related to potentially the string of words that you've just put together. If you ever put it that way, right? So you get them to speak slower, two things happen. The first thing is that they actually have to think about what they're saying. Right? So they have to actually specifically think and speak and use just the words they need to use to convey what is it they're thinking. It sounds so weird, right? But that's exactly what happens, right? The second thing that happens is that they actually heard what they just said. 90% of the time, I can tell you, fresh graduates don't even hear what they have just said. Right? Now the problem with that is that when you don't hear what you're saying, you can't commit. You don't know what you said. So if you can't commit to your words, then what is it that you've just conveyed, right? You just conveyed a bunch of words. There's no intention, there's no direction, there's no value there. And so how is the next person going to build off it? So if you just observe those things at the start, right? And I think as a foreigner, you should be a bit brutal with that, because you fortunately have had the benefit of when you were in kindergarten, people spoke to you and listened to what you were saying. A lot in Southeast Asia, people won't listen to kids, right? So they just talk, oh, it's cute, now we'll talk to them, right? And it's not a two-way conversation. So they don't actually learn this particular skill, right? So for me, that has been the most basic thing you can fix, right? And what amazingly happens after that, it takes about a year and a half, so I don't know how long you've been around, about a year and a half, the penny drops, and suddenly they actually realize, hey, my words actually carry weight, and I am now responsible for what I'm saying. Then you have ownership. Once you have ownership, you have a team. Prior to that, you basically have a bunch of slaves that you direct, right?
Interesting. I'm very happy that a foreigner actually says Malaysia is great. In fact, I am a big believer that Malaysia is one of the best places to live and work. But we often beat ourselves up too much. We're so hypercritical of ourselves. You only need to come back from a long holiday to say that, I miss Malaysia so much, right? Right? Am I right? And actually, recently we engaged one consulting firm comprising two foreigners. One is a British German, and I asked him why did he set up the office? Because most of these consulting firms, their office is somewhere in Singapore, Hong Kong, and all that. But this one is in Malaysia. So I asked him, and he said, "Oh, guess what? Malaysia actually is not the best in everything, but it's always the number 2 and number 3 in a lot of things. And overall, it passes, it ticks. And I think that is all about Malaysia. The other aspect when you talk about how to empower people, right? I had this very own Kisah Benar experience. And I was working in head office, and head office, as you know, is very top down. You just take orders. And 2 years into my job in OCBC, I was transferred to a branch, the small place. And one of the first things a branch, in those days, branch managers was the icon, they're like the mafia boss. Everything must go through him, customers must see him. But this boss was the most different boss. Some people say he's the most useless boss. And that goes to also tell you that you can learn from bosses that are very effective and bosses who are not so great in that sense. This boss actually pulled us all of us in one day we were supposed to be like little heads of their departments in the branch. They said, I want to be the most useless branch manager. So we were like, why? What do you mean by that? So he said, okay, I want you to, customer come and see, no need to go and see me, see you. And then when you want to see customer, I don't need to come along. Then I was thinking in my head, oh, I have to drive now. Because I can go with you, you know. So I think we learned so much. And I think you have to really take the bull by its horns and tell them, okay, I want you have to be very clear in your direction. I want ideas from you. You cannot say, oh, what do you think of that? Because, like I say, they are too used to hearing from you. They won't. But you have to tell them that, I want ideas from you. I think you can give ideas. And I want to build certain things in you. I think you're capable. I think I want decisions made. So you tell them the vision you have for them. And then they will rise to the vision. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for your very insightful and exciting. It turns out even much better than I thought. Than I dreamt. So before we end the panel discussion, is there any final words that you would like to share with the audience?
When am I not using the microphone? Right, so that you would like to share with the audience, something around leadership or much more grounded for them to take home and internalize and act on it. We do want people to go home and thinking about it and change behavior.
I presume we'll go around the panel. I just want to pick up on that word that was mentioned a few moments ago, which was vision. Particularly at a time of change, and if you want to take people on a journey with you with that change, you have to give them a vision of something that you're trying to achieve, something that's going to be better, and take them on that journey, because things aren't always straightforward. Another thing that I would say is very important, it's something we're thinking about at the University of Manchester at the moment, is thinking about the values of our organisation. What are the things that we hold dear, which are enduring about how we act as individuals, as leaders? And then again, the third thing that I would emphasise, particularly at a time of change, which all of us have touched on in different ways, is visibility as leaders, in communication and going out and talking to people all the time, but talking and listening about what we're trying to achieve and everybody's role in times of change and how that's going to be achieved successfully.
Thank you.
I think Malaysia needs to embrace the new leadership era. There is no more like the posturing that the Andres are wanting us to do. The change need to come from outside the organization. If you ask the government themselves to actually look into new leadership, it will not happen. So it has to come from outside, and it has to be discussed in a forum like this. I would welcome any inputs for our coming budget preparation. We will be launching the website. Please look out for it. We will also inform the social media that we need inputs from the public, and I always like new ideas. Let's see how in my final year of my service, how much can I push for this for these changes. I really welcome that. Thank you for your attendance, and I appreciate the views and the discussions that's going around. I think I did the right thing. I rejected the AGM. I said I choose to take this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siti. Thank you. Your final year? Wow. Okay, after this, I need to understand your beauty regime.
Earlier, I think Professor Fiona mentioned that inclusiveness and the divide, and I think we all know two very important factors confronting the world today, the sustainability of the environment. The other one is whether you're in Malaysia or in the US, the disparity of wealth. The people who have millions, like Jeff Bezos, 100 billion, I pity him, he can't even spend it all. But the reality is that I think a lot of companies have become so big, so profitable, and I think they forget some of the basic tenets of their profitability. I'm often very critical of Apple because I use a Lenovo, by the way. Because I believe, okay, no Apple fans here, they're great, but they actually make so much money. So when they make so much money, the question I ask you is whether they are squeezing all their suppliers, which every Apple supplier I know has that complaint, okay? Or they're making so much money from you. Imagine you have to pay 7,000 ringgit for an iPhone, right? So I think the thing that we need to do if you are leaders, and by the way, every one of you are a leader, but if you really get to a position of leadership, try to make sure that you influence your company and your people to do something more than just making money. Because every company that I know of now has a high percentage of young people. And the young people are no longer so poor because they're generally quite affluent. Because the parents have worked very hard and they have some kind of basic ability to survive. But they're looking for companies that can give some meaning. And it's about a sustainability environment where you earn money from the community, you need to give back. So on that basis, I would like to invite you, if you're free on Sunday morning, 7 p.m. tomorrow morning, OCBC have this tie-up with DBKL. Every first and third Sunday of the month, KL is closed and there's a 7-kilometer stretch all the way from Dataran Merdeka, all the way around KLCC and all that. We allow a lot of people to actually enjoy cycling, running, whatever. And we're tied up with World Vision. There'll be about 2,000 people there, and we're raising money for children. If you are free, come and join. You don't have to donate any money, just come and feel it and get involved with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. Okay. All right, Najib.
So
We are going to go Sunday morning, 7 a.m., right? 7 a.m. Okay.
So not much more to add. I think a lot's been said. If I can just pick up a bit from Dr. Ong, that as an entrepreneur, then the number one thing that we need to understand is creation of value. And I think that word is used a bit too easily. So I think we generally consider it just in terms of value of what someone would pay for it. But value has to be something that is going to make somebody's life better. Right? I truly believe that as an aerospace engineer, even we have that philosophy in how we do things, because we're able to transport people safely from one point to another. That lives, I think, in the aerospace community, in everything that we do, the standards and so on and so forth. So take some time to actually contemplate in terms of what you're doing. What is it that the value that you're creating, and be quite philosophical about it. I think, go down to the brass tacks. What is it that the value you're creating? Because I think the more you internalize it, if you're a religious person, relate it to your own values. This is quite important, because it's only then that the sincerity of what you do comes out. So entrepreneurs worry about value, and number 2, cash flow. Right? So thank you very much.